crew referrals, and locations, and any logistics that come up with film and TV productions.
And I'm a professor of communication arts at the University of New Hampshire in Manchester. I'm the director of that program, and I teach courses related to film and media production.
Gentlemen, what did you think about this?
I love this film. I've seen it a number of times, and I personally think it's a great example. As far as a teaching tool, this is great to inform, because how many interesting shots can you create when you're just driving down the road? So, how do you try to keep the viewer engaged in a film that's just on one stretch of road, using different angles, different shots, different emotions? And, I think it's an interesting exercise.
And it barely leaves the highway.
Barely, yeah.
It goes into Weaver's house. You're introduced to the wife and the family, but aside from that, and just going into a few incidental places along the highway, but it starts on the road, ends on the road. That's pretty incredible when you think about it, that he was able to pull this off. And I think the fantastic part about it is the fact that it was all shot on location. There's no rear screen projection here. It's all done. It was just around around Los Angeles, if I remember the locations.
Well, that wasn't the studio's idea.
Oh no, absolutely not.
The studio gave Spielberg 10 days to shoot this film, and he said he wanted to do it on location, and he wanted to do it completely, in the cars. He was told that they wanted him to do a great deal of the interiors in the studio lot, much like Alfred Hitchcock would have done.
Yep.
And indeed, this film is very much almost Spielberg does Hitchcock. But I think what's curious about it is that he said, okay, I'll do the film, and we'll go out for a couple of days. We'll see how much I accomplish, but I want to shoot it on location. He ended up completing it, I think, in 13 days.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's the backstory on that. But it wasn't the studio's, it wasn't Universal's idea.
Absolutely not. No, it was his idea.
And that's the curious thing. The thing that there's an interesting documentary about this film that is Spielberg's conversation about Duel. And what's interesting is he planned the entire film as like an architectural shoot. So he took the highways he was going to shoot at, and he plotted them like architectural drawings, and then worked all of his camera positions out so that he could maximize the way that he shot the film, and that's how he was able to accomplish that.
Yeah, what I find really interesting about this film in particular is that not only is it one of his first features, but you start to see where his career will go, what sort of shots he likes the best, what sort of motifs he likes to use, and you see this recurring again and again.
And also themes.
Themes. I mean, this is one of the first films where, you'll see in many of his films about separated families and the absence of the father, as they always say. Except this one's told from the absent father's point of view, and it's something that comes up in almost all of his films. There's estranged families with problems and fatherhood issues, and so you see that time and time. But then there's more formalist things that you see. Spielberg. I'm always a fan of Spielberg shooting through things, and you see a lot of that, whether it's through the laundry windows or, I remember Spielberg saying one time that he always shoots in layers, and whatever your subject is, you have something in the foreground and you have something in the background, and you kind of look through this new lens, and you see it a lot, whether it's through vehicles close up and you see the red car in different spots, or where he's placed, and you always have to kind of look around things, and that's a film.
The fact that they were willing to give even this project, a TV movie, to a 25-year-old film director is pretty incredible also. Hark back 40s when Orson Welles, coming off of some success in radio, was given the opportunity to make a movie at RKO Radio, and it probably turned out to be the best movie that he did, starting at a real pinnacle, and then maybe coming back to that pinnacle on a couple of occasions, but he had a real bumpy career. But Spielberg started off on, I would say this is a real high note, and he went back to doing a couple more made-for-TV movies at Universal, but then he ended up doing Sugarland Express, and then the third film that he did, feature-length movie, was Jaws. And this movie and Jaws, I think, has quite a few correlations. The truck is a monster. The truck seems to not want to be happy until it destroys this particular man and his vehicle. And that theme is very prevalent in Jaws.
Yeah, and even in films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh yeah,
we still have
goes
this
on.
idea of the Leviathan, of some nature
Yep.
that's descending upon, something of human scale. This was a time when the studio system was really broken, and they were looking for young directors, and I think that's why he was given an opportunity to work at Universal initially. He left film school, he was given an opportunity to work at Universal. He had done the Night Gallery piece with Joan Crawford called Eyes. I don't know if anyone's seen that, Rod Serling's Night Gallery. And then he had, before this film, I think he was coming off of doing a Columbo episode.
Yeah.
And he talked his way into doing this film because his assistant had seen this particular story in Playboy magazine. And Richard Matheson, the author, of course, had done both Twilight Zones and had written for Alfred Hitchcock's television series, as well as done a number of major motion pictures. That he was able to talk his way into doing this.
Yeah, no, Matheson had some credentials there at Universal.
Yeah, big credentials.
Not the least of which was Incredible Shrinking Man, which was very potent. And all the Hitchcock stuff, TV-wise, was shot at Universal, MCA. So there's some sincere connections.
And he did a lot of, he authored many Twilight Zone episodes as
Yes,
well.
yeah.
So there was that whole connection of, this film does have a lot of, it's informed pretty much with the suspense of Rod Serling and certainly Hitchcock. The whole soundtrack is almost, it's like Psycho. With the strings.
And it's, I think it's neat that the new director, whether it be Wells or whether it be Spielberg, they reach back and they find a cinematographer that has a lot of credentials, that has been doing it for years, and probably good sound men. I'm not familiar with the sound guy here, but I am familiar with the cameraman. The cameraman was a guy by the name of Jack Marta, who earned his credentials shooting literally hundreds of movies, mostly at Republic Pictures. There was a lot of Roy Rogers westerns and a lot of A product too, but it was at this really kind of B studio. And when that folded, Marta kind of freelanced around, and he ended up doing some stuff at Universal and quite a few of the major studios. The guy who did the Billy Jack movies latched on to Jack Marta and had him photograph all of those. And if the Billy Jack movies had nothing else going for them, they're well photographed. And Wells had Greg Tolan, and the combination of those guys created some pretty intriguing images in Citizen Kane. Deep focus lens and use of ceilings, pretty incredible what they came up with, and really broke a lot of rules in doing so.
Yeah, I don't know about the relationship of Spielberg and Marta.
No, I think that was just, I don't think, it was, I think Marta was available and probably was doing other things, but indeed there was a guy doing that was pretty expert at what he had to do, and they worked well together, I believe.
I know they brought vehicle technology to shoot the vehicle from the film Bullet. A lot of those shots that are alongside the vehicle.
Yeah, low-level ones.
The low-level shots, yeah. So they, I would imagine Martha was probably doing things he never did before in this.
That could be,
Because
sure. Given rein to have somebody who wanted to experiment, to see just exactly what he could do and how much he could push the envelope on what was a low-budget, made-for-TV movie. This was his chance, really, to really step forward and show people what he was capable of doing, and I think he accomplished it.
Wasn't this one of the most successful movies of the week? That was this was a
yeah,
period
yeah,
of time when they were just churning out
Right.
movies of the week.
Yeah,
right?
but you got to take into consideration the fact that back at this time, there wasn't really the encroachment of cable TV, and that the three networks were pretty much what people were watching. And so if you had anything that was good, it probably had a big share as far as the viewership was concerned. And I would assume that Universal probably realized that they had a pretty good piece of goods here, which it was shot in a limited period of time, and then it was put together in a limited period of time. If I remember the story, it was like 3.5 weeks that they had to do this, and they had numerous editors working with the footage, sometimes creating sequences from mixed footage that didn't necessarily get shot at the same time, but there was so much of it that they could create exciting sequences from the footage that indeed was photographed. I don't know, I think this is a pretty incredible piece of movie making.
Yeah, and the thing I get back to is Spielberg's capacity to get the audience to engage with the protagonist. I mean, he's got you, basically in the mind of the protagonist at the time, whether he's using extreme point of view shots, constantly showing the protagonist's point of view, he's telling the story from their viewpoint. And as a result, there were a number of you jumping at certain points of time because you were essentially seeing what Dennis Weaver sees through quick cut editing.
I'm never a fan of voiceovers, and I was thinking as he's speaking how well these scenes would have worked had you removed the voiceover, and I actually think it would have worked quite well.
I agree.
That one long tracking shot into the bathroom, and we just see him kind of washing up and gathering his thoughts. I just, had you not put the voiceover in there, I think it would have been just as effective. And my favorite scene is the one in the restaurant where he's looking at everybody at the counter. And that, you didn't need any sort of voiceover there. You just watch it all unfold. And it goes back to the whole Blade Runner thing. Is the voiceover in? Is the voiceover out? Whose choice was that? Did the studio see a cut of Duel and say, hey,
I bet they pushed for the voiceover.
This shot is really long, maybe we need a voiceover.
For television, I bet they pushed really hard.
Do you suspect that maybe that's the way it was written too? I wonder.
I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't read the story.
Yeah. No, I don't know either.
Yeah,
but I just wonder if indeed that may have been the case.
It always feels, every time the voiceover came in, it felt forced. Like it was placed in a moment that you could see a studio exec saying, oh, geez, this is kind of running a little dry. Let's throw some.
And it's different than, for instance, when Janet Leigh is driving to the Bates Motel in Psycho and she's hearing all the voices. Yeah. It plays different when you're actually hearing the protagonist's voice of what he's thinking. When the audience would have free reign, so we'd have to have Steven Spielberg here, I guess, to find out whose decision that was. But
what did you think of Weaver in the role?
I liked it. I like all the, I'm aging myself here, but I was, this is a year before I was even born. So he was, I think at that time he was, what was the show? It was Hooper? Or what? McCloud. McCloud. And I don't remember seeing a lot of him elsewhere.
Well, purportedly, Weaver got the role because of his role in Touch of Evil.
that was Spielberg.
He plays a rather demented clerk at the hotel that poor Janet Leigh again ends up at. And I think I watched the same documentary that you did. He really is wide-eyed. I didn't remember that from the movie, having seen it so many years ago. But that was indeed what Spielberg remembered when the option of maybe having Dennis Weaver do this part, as he was one of the prospects, and Spielberg, I want Weaver, and Weaver indeed agreed to do the part. Spielberg thinking that because of what he saw in Touch of Evil, Dennis probably could replicate at the end of this movie when he's really going a little bonkers trying to figure out how is he going to extract himself from this situation that he's got himself in.
Plus in Touch of Evil he plays an extremely paranoid character, and this film is all about paranoia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it really was quite...
You question Dennis's stability right from the get-go, from the conversation that he has with the wife.
Oh, exactly. I mean, this film could have been directed in such a way, it just keeps in my mind, it could have been directed in such a way so you never really knew if what was happening actually happened. Now, that's not what wasn't Spielberg's intention, quite clearly from this, but the film could have been shot in such a way so that you questioned in the end whether these events actually occurred. He chose not to do that,
and perhaps the best conceit is not showing the driver.
That was Matheson's choice, evidently.
Yep.
That was the story.
Yep.
Not idea.
Yeah, but that's unusual. Usually there's a point in time when you see the face, finally, of the person, or the facade of the person. But you see his legs and boots and one arm.
That's all.
Come on.
Yeah, and you don't know. And that whole scene I mean, I think one of the best scenes is clearly, and you mentioned it, the scene in Chuck's, where he's trying to decide who is this person, and we're constantly seeing Weaver's point of view, or man's point of view, trying to figure out who this person is as these people look at him. So we're constantly seeing what he's seeing, and then he's imagining as we walk, and we see the subjective camera of him walking over individually, which is precisely, I don't know if anyone's ever seen North by Northwest, but it's precisely that scene when our protagonist is confronting Kaplan and Hitchcock moves the camera across the road, right, the same way. It's clear that, that Spielberg's doing Hitchcock.
Yeah, he's definitely influenced.
So, but that's an incredible scene of use of point of view.
And it looks like it was a lot of fun. It was a chance for Spielberg to get as much shot variation as he can through people, looking back, It was just it must have been an editor's dream.
Did anyone see his intentional or unintentional cameo?
No, missed it.
When Weaver's initially in the phone booth with the snake lady, on the second shot, you can see Spielberg standing there, kind of like some kind of California Hawaiian shirt. You can kind of see him in the corner.
There's a reflection.
Yeah, it's a reflection in the. Now, whether it was done intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know.
But that was one of the shots, because of the budgetary constrictions here, that shot of having Dennis in that phone booth and the final shot of the truck and the car going over the precipice was done once. That's all they wanted to. It was all timed, all pre-planned, number of cameras situated. So, and that was really Weaver inside the phone booth. There was no stuntman. Weaver wanted to do it, and they had it all timed out so that if Kerry Laughlin, the guy who played the driver, who was the stunt coordinator also for the piece, they had a point at which if Weaver hadn't started to make a move by the time the truck reached that point, he was to abort hitting the telephone booth. But Weaver was right on as far as his movement was concerned, and bam, into the booth. Because there is no rear projection here, and from the point of view of the audience, here's Dennis on the phone, and coming at him from the rear is the monster.
And when you think of all the action films Spielberg went on to do, I mean, whether it be the Indiana Jones franchise or anything else, I mean, this is really a precursor to all that action work.
Yeah.
He's probably working through a lot of the things that he's gonna be doing, you know, coming forward.
Oh, even the shot variation on a lot of the truck approaching scenes where you're looking into the circular rear view mirrors. You know, he did that a lot during the truck chase scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and
Yep.
you see a lot of
Yep.
things he was borrowed. I actually, I'll have to double check, but the woman who runs the snake station, I think he brings her back to run the gas station in 1941.
He does.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's.
Lucille Benson.
Yes, yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's, and,
yeah.
you know,
And
fill it up with
she's-
Ethel, and she says.
She's older, but she's there.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. No, I think Spielberg had a great deal of nostalgic thoughts during his career, that he would use people in certain ways, actor-wise, and then would bring them back, and it may have been very slight.
It's
but-
almost the same
but
character.
they were there.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
great, it's great.
Exactly. Yeah. Fascinating.
Are there any
filmmaking.
questions or
Yeah,
comments
please.
that people?
I just want to revisit something. I think you had said it about, or Fitz said it first, about the truck being the monster. And I would just love to hear you guys kick around, is the truck the monster or is the driver the monster? Externally, the truck is certainly made up and to be a monster. But a truck is just a truck. It's the driver who has the intent and the ill will. So to me, it almost kind of feels like that's the real monster is the driver. I don't know if he does anything that would cause me to say he's exploring the motif, but just to me, that was a question when you said that. I'm thinking, well, it's really the driver is really the monster. And we never see that monster. But anyway.
But if you were to see him, would you consider him to be that? That's even though through his actions were done through the vehicle. I don't know if does that
It
make
becomes
sense?
a different film altogether if you now start engaging, if you decide to characterize the driver and have him be part of the film. I mean, I think it was quite clear, from at least the things that I've read, that Spielberg was intent on having the truck be this giant monster. In fact, he said that if you saw the same piece I did, that essentially the truck was made, you know, Dennis Weaver had his makeup person, and the truck had their makeup person. They would be brushing on oil and dirt and grime on the truck to make it look as monster-like as possible. And in fact,
And he particularly picked that type of truck for its frontal look. It looks like a face, to the degree of maybe having down at the bumper level a mouth that's going to come in.
the two windshields look like eyes,
Yep.
he said, and the protrusion of the hood is like a nose. So that was his intent, to really, you know, and I think that he was quoted in the British press as saying this film was really about technology. This film was sort of about technology out of control in some way. So interesting that he would make that comment.
Because he would, well, kind of part of it too is thinking back to the movie. Like I said, I mean, I definitely agree with not showing the driver, and I would never say that was. But it was just the idea that like that scene where he starts to approach, where he's like, it's like he wants to go mano a mano, and it's like the driver pulls away, you know, or pulls the truck away, and I almost felt like it's like it was kind of like. I started picturing a very little man driving that truck. Like, without that truck, he's nothing. Or without him, the truck is nothing either. Because like, one can't necessarily do its thing without the other. So, I mean, yeah, it's just kind of a weird metaphysical concept that the movie just brought up in my head, was like, they're kind of interconnected, but, and again,
But seeing the truck has a presence.
Yeah.
If you just saw the guy, you probably wouldn't be intimidated unless you knew his character, knew what he might be capable of doing. The truck, you can almost envision what that would be capable of doing if it were in the wrong hands.
well, and that's, I mean, like I said, I think that's why I started picturing a small person, was like, he couldn't, without the truck, that driver could, knew he couldn't, I mean, it was like, he was almost like, without the truck, it's like they talk about, the Napoleon syndrome, or, somebody who's a real tough guy with a gun, and then you take the gun away, and they're like groveling. Like in Tombstone, for instance, when he takes the gun away from, when Kurt Russell's character takes the gun away from Billy Bob Thornton's character, and all of a sudden he's like just groveling, and you realize he's nothing. He's been bullying everybody, and then you take it away. It's like you kind of get the sense if you took that truck away, this is a guy who would fold.
Well, that's the beauty part of the choice of not showing the driver. Now the viewer, whether it's you or anyone else, can sort of project whatever they want on that driver.
Well, you were talking about without the dialogue, even with no dialogue whatsoever, just by having Dennis Weaver walk towards the truck pulls away. It's like I feel like he communicates something, at least to me, that I'm perceiving. He's communicating something about the entity behind the wheel.
And see, it's about Dennis Weaver too, because very early on, all of us have the same feeling. I mean, we've all been in situations of some kind in life where we've been sort of engaged in perhaps an adversarial issue with another person. It could be a vehicle, road rage. We've all experienced that. And so as a result, Spielberg is playing on that. And of course, we're cringing as Dennis Weaver early on is becoming more engaged in this, and we know, of course, we know because of the it's a film and how it's been publicized. We know no good is going to come of it, and it's sort of like we as the audience know more than he knows. It's like, oh, how could you do that? Right? It's sort of a classic thing that Hitchcock does, right? The audience always kind of knows a little more than the players in the film.
It kind of reminded me, I mean, aside from the civil aspects of